Here we go, people. Good morning. It is I'm coming to you solo today. This is what we do now on Mondays. And I apologize for being late. I don't apologize for being late when I'm on with Jen because it's kind of expected. I mean, that really, I'm throwing her under the bus now. That really is a concession to Jen, generally, the not being on time, the being 10-ish. Me, I like to be on time. But something happened today, and maybe some of you can relate to this. I had one of these situations where I was contacted by the electric company, and they were saying that they're gonna shut me off. They didn't contact me directly. It's one of my employees, but it was one of these situations where it's like we're going to shut you off because you haven't paid for 17 years. It's like, huh? I'm on auto pay. Well, we've been sending you notices. Well, I don't look. I'm on auto pay. Has anyone ever had that situation happen? The whole purpose of auto pay is to just set it and forget it. And then you get contacted and you're told that, it's been so long since you've paid. So we had to handle that. So that's why I'm a little late today. I can't promise I won't be late again next week, but I'll do my best. But I hope everyone's doing well. April 5th. We got a lot of things happening. Tonight is the NCAA final, the men's final. The women's final was yesterday. Stanford won. They beat a game Arizona team. Yankees are 1-2. Not happy about that. The Knicks are playing well. We had Easter yesterday. There's just a lot of stuff going on right now. And I've been saying this for a while. Maybe it's just me being very positive, but something's in the air. It feels like everything is changing and blossoming. It's almost like springtime. So that's kind of what's happening with that. But I wanted to talk today a little bit about a subject that you're going to find intriguing, and that's this: constitutional law. Now, I know you're thinking, you're not a lawyer. You don't even play one on TV. Why are you talking about constitutional law? Well, I'll have you know that when I was an undergrad, I took a constitutional law class. Now, when I say take a constitutional law class, it doesn't mean I went to the classes. It was offered very early in the morning. But I can tell you what I remember from the constitutional law class, and maybe you can relate to this as well, because we've all had classes, and years later, when we reflect on them, maybe we remember one or two things. So let me summarize what I remember about constitutional law. I remember Marbury versus Madison. I remember Plessy versus Ferguson. And I remember Brown versus the Board of Education. And that's it. That's the sum total of what I remember. Don't ask me what these cases were about. Don't ask me the fact patterns. Don't ask me what the conclusions were. Even though I know one of them established judicial review, I'm not sure exactly which one. So don't ask me. But there is one case that if you ask me about, I know what it's about. And that's this: McDonald's versus that old lady who burnt herself with coffee. Does everyone know this case? I mean, this is the kind of thing that really sticks in your mind, not like those ridiculous, obscure con law classes. McDonald's versus the burnt lady broad. And what happened is that this lady says that she went to McDonald's, she got a cup of coffee, she was driving, and the coffee spilled in her lap, and she developed all these burns. She ended up being rewarded $3 million. She found some shark attorney, and she herself was a shark. She was just putting one over on everyone, and she got $3 million. What precedent did that establish? Well, it established that we needed some tort reform in our country, right? We needed to change the laws when it came to civil cases and cap payments and do all kinds of things like that. Now, here's the problem with everything that I just related to you. It's not exactly true. That's the story that everyone knows, right? There was a song by Leonard Cohen, Everybody Knows. But it's not exactly true. So let's look at the story again with actual facts about what happened. 1992, 79-year-old woman. Her name was Stella Liebig. She went to McDonald's. It was with her grandson. She was in the passenger seat. She got the coffee. It was too hot for her to drink right away. Anyone who's ever had McDonald's coffee knows that it's too hot to drink right away. So she wanted to put some cream and sugar in it. They pulled over in the parking lot, and the car she was in, it didn't have a cup holder. It didn't have any surfaces that were flat. So she decided to put the coffee cup between her legs, as any of us might have done. And, pardon me, little nose itch. And it spilled into her lap. Now, the coffee scalded her almost immediately. It scalded her genital area. That's not general, the genital, her genital area, her thighs. She actually had burn marks in about 16% of her body. About 6% of those marks were from third-degree burns. She was significantly burned, so much that she went into shock. She subsequently went to the hospital. While in the hospital, she was there, by the way, for a week. They had to do a skin graft, something they call a debridement procedure. They had to get rid of all the dead skin, and they had to do a skin graft. It was pretty horrifying. When she got out of the hospital, she had a pretty sizable debt there. She owed a lot of money. I think it was about $20,000. I've heard different reports. I read different reports. One was $11,000, one was $20,000. But the fact is that she contacted the McDonald's Corporation so they could pay that money. Well, they refused her. They offered her $800. She got an attorney, and they went to court. Now, the attorney that they got, he had already sued McDonald's before. He had won a judgment from them for the same issue. And when they went to court, some things were established. First of all, McDonald's heats up their coffee to between 180 and 190 degrees. The director of quality control for McDonald's says that he's aware that at that temperature, it's a hazard. Now, why do they make it so hot, McDonald's coffee? Well, I heard various answers. By the way, let me just state that I did not read the actual complaint. I did not read the court transcripts. I went to certain websites that talked about it. I listened to a couple of videos on YouTube, and years ago, I had seen a documentary called Hot Coffee. So while they were in court, some things were established. Again, McDonald's established that they made their coffee very hot. They knew it was a danger. It turns out that in the previous 10 years, McDonald's had gotten approximately 700 complaints and had settled paying $500,000. These were all to people who had burned themselves because their coffee was so hot. Now, when asked about it, I say McDonald's stated because I'm not sure who exactly, but McDonald's stated that it was statistically insignificant. It was about 1 out of every 24 million cups. Therefore, they were okay with it. One of the jurors subsequently said, after the trial, said that they were just shocked by the callousness of it because every one of those 700 people was a human being with a story, and they had gotten hurt. Well, maybe not everyone. I don't know the exact facts concerning all 700, but in a lot of these instances, and by the way, those were the ones who were reported. I mean, you can make a logical inference that more people than that had gotten burned. As to the why they kept their coffee so hot, I've heard different things. An attorney for them said, well, it was kind of industry standard to do that. That's the temperature that extracts the most flavor. And a lot of people want hot coffee. A lot of people apparently, they drive long distances and they want to have coffee while they're at work. So they want it to be hot when they get there. Someone suggested, and again, I don't know who, I don't think this was part of the trial. I think they were opining on this, but someone suggested that it works out well for McDonald's if a person actually takes the cup into the office with them and everyone can see that they have a McDonald's cup. So if the coffee is very hot, if you can't even drink it while you're commuting, well, then they get more advertising that way. I've also heard, although again, I don't think this is something that came up in trial. If it is, it's not something that I learned while looking this up yesterday. But I've also heard that another reason that they do it is because they don't want people complaining that their coffee's not hot enough coming back and upsetting the whole line, right? You can see how that could happen. Let's say in one day you had a half a dozen people who came back and took time while you were trying to process all these other orders. So they don't like that. If it's excessively hot, they never have to deal with that. It's up to the individual, and they can just kind of take it and they can put milk in it and they can wait till it cools off. And then McDonald's never has to deal with that situation. So that's a possibility. That sounds somewhat reasonable. Now, the judgment came back. The court rendered a judgment of compensatory damages. So compensatory means that's what you're compensating the victim for. Compensatory damages of $200,000. The judge said, well, you know, the lady has to take some responsibility. She's the one who spilled it. And so therefore, I'm going to lower it. And so he lowered it to $160,000. Now, the jurors also came back with a judgment for punitive damages. Punitive damages is different than compensatory damages. Punitive damages is done to punish the offender so they don't do it again. You see, the jury was very moved by the fact that this was happening. McDonald's knew about this. They had been warned about it. And they had kind of a callous disregard in the eyes of the jury. So what they decided to do was to come forth with punitive judgments of $2.7 million. And that's how ultimately it was $3 million. Or thereabouts, right? So how did they come to that number? Did they just pick that out of a hat? Did they just pick that out of the air? No. That's 2 days coffee revenue for McDonald's Corporation. They make approximately $1.35 million, or they did back then. This was in the 90s. $1.35 million per day selling coffee. So that's what they said. They said 2 days worth of that. Now, did she ever receive that? Did Stella, this woman who was now 81 years old, did she ever receive any of that money? She received something. It wasn't that. The judge eventually lessened that to in the neighborhood, I think, of $600,000 or $540,000. It was something like that. But it was approximately triple what was awarded for the compensatory damages. And she didn't even receive that because both she and McDonald's threatened to appeal. Ultimately, they came to a decision. They settled, and it was for less than that amount. It wasn't reported what that settlement was. It should be noted, however, that this woman had never been in litigation before, and that before the trial, they tried to settle. She tried to settle for an amount that was less than that. She didn't want to go to trial. She didn't want too much. First, she just only wanted the $20,000 to cover the costs of her medical costs, her hospital stay, and the procedures that she had. And her lawyer asked for a little bit more than that once she hired a lawyer, which is what you would expect. But this never had to go to court. McDonald's chose to do it. Why did they choose to do it? Not in their skin, I can't say for sure, but probably because they wanted to have a precedent. Their claim, at least part of their claim, obviously, was that this woman is the one who spilled it. We provided the product. She's the one who spilled it. Therefore, we have no responsibility. It's a reasonable argument. If you cut your finger, should you sue the knife manufacturer because the knife is too sharp? It's a very reasonable argument. But the point here is that without having the facts, this became a cause célèbre. This was reported by various newspaper outlets. Seinfeld did a thing about it where Kramer burnt himself and he got a big settlement, or at least he was supposed to, until he screwed it up. There was a song made with it. I think Kenny Chesney or one of those country dudes. I don't know who. I mean, this became a big deal, and it actually was used as a kind of an allegory about our terrible court system and how people of low responsibility and low moral fiber can just sue corporations for all these millions of dollars and get rewarded. And how these lawyers are also unethical. But that's if you assume the facts that we said in the beginning. That this was the result of a sharky lawyer. This was a result of a woman of horrible ethics, a dishonest woman who was not willing to take responsibility. And all the reportage on it was wrong. Not all of it, but a lot of it was just wrong. She wasn't driving. That's first of all. Right? She was in the passenger seat. She wasn't looking for a huge payout. She wasn't looking to get wealthy. Do you know that this woman subsequently, and back in the day, they didn't call it this, but I think she was kind of canceled or at least ridiculed and tormented in some ways for the rest of her life. It was such a big thing, and she became this symbol. She was this negative symbol. And why? Because neither the press nor the people who were consuming the press took the time to find out the actual facts of the case. It became one of those things that everybody knows. Everybody knows that our system is so messed up, our civil court system, that, you have these people who take advantage, these parasites. They take advantage and they get all these big judgments and they become wealthy for doing nothing, for being professional victims. Everybody knows that. May or may not be true, but it's certainly not borne out by this particular case. But no one took the time. I wonder if it's something about us that we have trouble with nuance. We have trouble understanding things that are more than a couple of sentences long, because that's what happened. Everything was boiled down into headlines. The facts of the case didn't matter that much anymore. People used it for their own agenda. Government officials, legislatures, they used this story. They spoke about it in their chambers. They spoke about it. They argued that we need tort reform. Tort reform, by the way, is basically a set of laws that, again, will cap judgments, right? And it does other things, like it might demand binding arbitration for certain things. I mean, that's what they were trying to do. So it was them taking advantage of it. McDonald's ultimately didn't get hurt. They got a lot of free publicity. Somehow they became the victim. And that's probably not an accident. There's suggestions that that's what they did with their huge PR department, as opposed to this old lady. So there is a problem here. Is the problem with the press? Yes. Is the problem with us and our attention spans? Yes. Is it because we're too judgmental? Absolutely. Walt Whitman once said, "Be interested, not judgmental." As soon as we make it a judgment, and generally when we make a judgment, we get positioned about it, right? So as soon as we make a judgment and get positioned about it, well, all the interest goes out the window. We're not interested anymore. We know. Everybody knows. It becomes a fixed idea. The French call it the idea fixe. And that's it. And it takes up residence in our minds as if it's furniture and it's nailed down. And this is what happened in this case. It's not the only case. And I don't only mean legal case. It's not the only instance where we have just a very simple answer and that becomes our truth. I mean, one thing that comes to mind, and it's just kind of random, is this whole idea of calcium. right? Calcium for strong bones. Bones are made of calcium. Here's how this works. Bones are made of calcium. Therefore, if you want strong bones, ingest a lot of calcium. Milk has a lot of calcium. Therefore, drink milk, you'll have stronger bones. Well, guess what? The dairy industry was enjoined from saying that in their ads. They were saying that in their ads. They were implying that you could fight osteoporosis. But it's not that simple. First of all, there's no proof of that. There's no proof that milk leads to stronger bones and can cure osteoporosis. And there's some anecdotal evidence that would suggest that that's not the case, right? Apparently, the countries with the highest consumption of milk also have very high rates of osteoporosis. It's more complicated than that. Dairy, it's a strong protein, it's acidic, and the body needs to buffer that acidity, so it goes to the calcium that's in the bones. It actually leaches calcium from the bones. Now, I'm not sure if that's an established fact or if that's just the most likely scenario, but that is the likely mechanism from my readings. Let me qualify this. From my readings, that is the likely mechanism of osteoporosis. Weak bones, right? It comes ultimately from a body that's not nutritionally sound. Too many toxins, not enough nutrients, right? And then the body uses the bones as a kind of a storehouse, as a bank. And it'll take the calcium out, it'll put them in the blood. But to understand that, you have to understand a few things preceding it. There are more facts. It's more involved. There's some nuance there. We don't do nuance, apparently, as Americans. We like easy answers. Here's another one that we hear a lot. If you want to be hydrated, drink 8 8-ounce glasses. Really? So a 350-pound man should drink 8 8-ounce glasses, and so should a 35-pound child? Toddler? I mean, some of these things, they're just very simple. They're very glib, and we take them for granted. We assume that that is the case, and they become facts. They become more than facts. They become law. They become the structure from which we build our understanding about things. So I guess my point is this, is that not everything is so simple. And if we do nothing else but follow what Walt Whitman said, if we just continue to be interested, that in and of itself would solve a lot of things, wouldn't it? If we didn't slap a label on something, assume that we knew everything about it just because we've heard something from some source, from some appeal to authority, or some, brainworm that just crawled inside somehow, we'd probably all be a lot better off. Right? It's amazing when you see two people fighting about things that they don't really know the facts. It just kind of sounds right. We've seen that. We do see it a lot. So anyway, that's pretty much the story that I wanted to tell for today. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing in its own way. I don't know what it means. I haven't extracted all of the meaning from it and all of the lessons, but it's become an allegory of a different type. And that's the take-home lesson. If we could all commit to just being interested and not judgmental, then we would all be a lot better off, a lot happier. All right, that's it for me today. I've got stuff to do. I can't stay here all day as much as I'd like to. Everyone, have a terrific day. Jennifer posted a survey last night. Answer that if you can. If not, there are just some people who don't like speaking out in a public forum. I'm one of them. I very rarely, will put my opinion on some kind of a thread. So contact us directly. We might reach out to you. We're just interested in those things that you're interested in, ultimately. Well, not necessarily. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd be talking about sports a lot, but you might not want to know about that. So let me know about that, because I would love to dive into the Giants draft. I'd love to break down what's happening with the Knicks and the Yankees' chances of winning number 28, which, of course, as everyone knows, God is a Yankee fan. Therefore, they are likely going to win their 28th World Series this year. God bless the Yankees. Take care, everyone.